Yes. Okay.
Hi, my beautiful people. Welcome to another episode of Mindful, the podcast. Now, today we have a very, very important topic to discuss. And this topic is codependency. And I know a lot of you don't know what that is because I'm just learning about it. But codependency is a complex issue. And we have with us today the codependency guru, I say.
Yeah.
She has done a lot of work on codependency on the topic. And we have with us our guest is Bianca Grace. Hi, Bianca.
Hi there. Thank you for a warm introduction. It is a complex issue.
Yes. But, a lot of people don't really know what it is. So can we start off by, you telling us codependency is, what it's about?
Yeah, and I think that's what's interesting. I find actually that the definition is all-encompassing, meaning people don't know a lot about what codependency is because it's kind of like the air we breathe. It does not necessarily have to be a pathology or something wrong with you. We're taught this on so many levels to be what we would call codependent instead of interdependent on others, by society, by our family first. So I like to say, as far as what the definition, the definition sometimes always makes it sound like it's something that we have, like a symptom, like we've acquired something, like this is what we are, as if that's in a vacuum. Codependency is something that we've learned through a lot of different institutions and types of situations socially that we involved ourselves in. But to kind of round that out, that really is what I call outside in thinking, where we're constantly thinking instead of about others, about how they feel, about what their needs are and how to take care of them before our own. And that's really how is like, you can notice, and the worse that this gets is the more I see that people really don't have the ability to reverse that. I never hear about an I never hear about what I want, what I'm going to do, what I need. I'm always hearing about, in everything they say, they're talking about others in those ways. So yes, it's kind of a reverse order way of relating to yourself and the world.
So it's like thinking about others, putting others before yourself. So it's always you. I have to always deal with them, instead of me and what I need.
Right. And so chronically so. So to the point where, yes, there is this balance. Of course, we want to think about others. This is just really swung to one side of that spectrum of relating to ourselves and others and how we think about ourselves.
Okay, so help me to understand a little bit. So if I'm a person who, well, I know a lot of persons who like to give. Yes. So, you have someone who's giving, someone who likes to do a lot for people. I'll do for people before I even actually do for myself.
Yeah.
So if I'm the one who someone calls and I'm always running to the rescue, they want me to babysit and I'm babysitting all the time. If my husband wants, and I mean, my husband always wants me to do things. So
yeah,
the one who always wants me to do this, pass this, go pick up this, go. Am I the one am I codependent? Like, am I the one who is codependent, or are they the one that's codependent?
This is where it gets pretty hairy. But both of you can have different aspects of it. We have the taker and the giver. We actually we need the other to act out our codependency. So in codependency, we talk a lot about enabling. So a lot of times as children, we derived some sense of self-worth and safety by providing for others that might have been less secure than we wanted them to be, like parents that maybe had to work and leave us alone, or had addictions and didn't prioritize us, or had a lot of, any sort of family trauma. A lot of times a child's defense will be to rise to an occasion, to act more adult, to take care of them, so they then feel like the parent can then take care of them. So this is the coping mechanism a lot of times for a certain amount of trauma but at the same time gratifies us. We start feeling really like we're the doer, we can do everything. And that gives us a sense of identity and self-worth, which I found is profound for the child, like really helps them be resilient and strive and maybe even excel in school, even if they're coming from a very bad place, at home or whatever. So there is what we would call, this is a pretty adaptive coping mechanism to be a caregiver or a giver. But what we're doing is, in some ways, is now really working ourselves into a bit of a rut with that identification. Because when we get older, this is not adaptive anymore. If we're still thinking that our self-worth is dependent on how much we give, do, and are to others, we really need needy people. So we attract, we're very attracted to people that need us. And that's the caregiver version of this.
Or maybe we want people to always need us, so we do the things for them to always want us to need us.
Right, which is the catch-22 of this. Absolutely. It's kind of this rough edge that the codependent at some point, especially as an adult, says, when are they going to learn? When are they going to recognize me? When am I going to get back? I'm like, well, they're never going to, because you've never frustrated their growth. You've never challenged them. You've never not given. So it's a little bit of an edge that where you're really training somebody to continue to not grow in those areas, because there's no me or I. Remember, there's no I to say, I want that time. I can't go that errand, or I can't go pick this up. I have my time set out for me. You can do it though.
I started to get a little bit edgy a while ago, because I'm like, am I codependent? Because I did a podcast before entitled, Do You Do Everything for Everybody? And when I was doing the research for that, it's like, they say it's overachiever. So, and it started from when you were younger, that you are always doing. You might be the oldest, always doing things for people in the home. Right. So people always looking to you for advice, that sort of thing. So it's like you grow up. When you grow now, you're like thinking that you need to be doing things for other people. Right. So you keep going, just doing things all the time. But I realize now, based on your explanation, that there's a thin line between, there's a little thin line. It's, can you now say, no, I need my time. No, I can't do this at this time. We just keep running to help, no matter what it is that may be going on in our lives, or what we might be, feeling emotionally, or that sort of thing. So I think I'm understanding now that fine line between the codependent,
Right. Where it becomes what I say, like, again, it's more of a relationship between how you identify with yourself. The fine line is always around the deep psychological components of how much you depend still on beingness, even though it's exhausting you. You haven't had the awareness yet of it, and then some sort of strategy to replace it with a different idea of yourself, and starting to face feelings that come up when you don't do for people. Like, the number one thing is when you set out that I value my time, so I need to set a boundary, and then I feel guilt. So a lot of people with codependency are very scared, or scared of codependent tendencies, I like to say, are very, or have some sort of irrational fear of that they won't be able to handle the feeling of guilt. I start to really challenge that too. But we have to peel back enough layers to get to that.
Yes.
And then you see that you can. Because it's really like, because we start to weigh out, can you just continue to do and be exhausted and never give to yourself, or can you handle a little guilt? Which is the one. They're not going to be.
Because I have a friend that is always doing, and as you said, the guilt, sometimes I have to say, well, I think she does a lot for the family, a lot for the friends, and I think go beyond, and sometimes when you say, or when I say something, the guilt, I feel that she's experiencing this guilt that if I don't do, then this may happen to them, that sort of thing. So
this might happen to them, and then I'll feel regret that I didn't just do it. Regret is another one. And abandonment. If I don't do for them, they won't do for me. They won't be here for me. They'll leave me behind. Somehow they won't see me as important enough to contact. So even being the one that's contacted to do things is equated again in our minds from childhood that we're important. And if we're important, we won't be abandoned or neglected. This has to be reworked. And if it's not, if this is logical slightly when you're a child, because you are in survival mode. But if you've been doing for a person over and over again and it equals nothing, and they really would abandon you, if you need to find that out.
I keep saying that if you keep doing and then it's not being reciprocated, then when are you going to realize that it's not worth it?
Yes.
And I get that if you're codependent, the need to always feel needed is there, and the guilt part of it is there, and maybe the abandonment. If I don't give to you, then so it's codependent. But what else? What other signs are there to let us realize that if
and you cut out just a little bit there. Just repeat yourself one more time on that.
Oh, I was saying if I'm codependent, it's the need to always feel needed, and then we have the guilt. The guilt that I have to do for you or else something will happen, that sort of thing. And the abandonment part of it, that if I don't do or give, then no one will be there for me. So I'm realizing that those are like 3 signs or things. So I'm asking you, what else? What other signs can we look out for to know if I am codependent or if others are codependent?
Right, on us. I think that other things that I notice are, if we look at it's generally in our relationships, but at the same time, probably a sign that people don't see is how, again, the relationship with themselves. The relationship with themselves is really lacking. It's not you'd find that people with codependent tendencies sometimes can have, like, again, the kind of a side of them that possibly has a kind of a victim still living there. A victim or somebody that's been traumatized or hurt, that they're still trying to overcome and override and bully through even. But it comes up sometimes, like, woe is me. I am really at my wit's end. And I think you can become overwhelmed. And I think this relationship with yourself being in such, like, kind of always being the doer, even though you're seen as important as an adult, you start feeling a bit like a slave. You feel like you're like the maid, or like you're like always the person that has to do. And so you're never in charge, but you're in charge of everything. This conflict starts to weigh on a person. And I find that they can become depressed. more easily than others, as a way to what I would call blanket the aggression, like put a wet blanket on that. I want to break out of this. These relationships are trapping me in this dynamic, which they are and they aren't, right? You know, but and then so they, oh, but I you know, and then they put they internalize that aggression and they get in battle with themselves. They doubt themselves. They serious self-doubt will be very negative and critical. So these types of things, I mean, just even those two generally lead to a nice pool of other feelings and why they think that way or how they failed. And we can really get into the depths with that. But I just say, you know, instead of looking, I mean, there are some really key components on the outward, but there are some very, I think, consistent dynamics that are happening on the inside. That when I work with somebody, generally I find that they're not in peace inside themselves. You know, there's something that they're in conflict because they're not really getting satisfaction or fulfillment from this any longer.
Yes.
And the I wants to be formed. We really do strive to make meaning, strive for fulfillment, strive for happiness. We are always looking, we're seeking creatures. So we, you know, I think that that's the problem, is that this part of us is trying to grow and this is just really draining us, tying us down. So, instead of being angry though, I say, I mean, people can snap. I mean, I've had my total years of codependency, so I can be completely honest and say, you know, definitely what we call it too. There's another thing is like the volcano. We definitely don't like conflict, so we avoid, and then boom, explode.
And explode.
Yeah, you want to see conflict, you know. So it's like it's these types of tendencies that this avoidance, this trying to turn it all inward. It backfires, and we tend to then deal with some pretty heavy emotions.
But like, Bianca, can I have, okay, in my hearing you talk about this, in my, like, in the initial part of my marriage, right? I realized that you know, you have conflict. You have your little conflict. Myself to be very strong and independent, and in conflict times, sometimes what I would do is, to avoid conflict, I would just take the step back. So instead of arguing all the time, when it's coming, I would take the step back and be like the subdued one. And then I realized, as you said, you know, it's not fulfilling. And the anger builds up inside, you know, and the I wants to come out.
Yes.
What I want and what I want to do. And I can remember I'd be subdued, and it's killing me inside. And then I just snap. Yes. And when I snap really big. Like,
I get you.
Go all out violent.
Right.
You know, so is that codependent behavior?
Yeah.
Or is it just relationship issues?
Yeah. Well, there's like, I probably say that most relationships, well, actually, some people really are what I would call, they get hungry for the fight. They're very extroverted or externalizers with their aggression. So that's that is a very codependent dynamic, which I think has a better prognosis, by the way, than if you were just saying, I saw an opportunity to fight and I was going in every time. We'd be talking about something different there. So codependency tends to have this window of objectivity that new things can happen, but it does require like a meeting in the middle. What I call that, mostly that even though your partner probably doesn't want to mitigate some of these things so often, but what I find is that we have smaller, once the feeling rises up, we have to have a conversation about that. And some people are very used to not having a conversation, having the blowout and starting a cycle of guilt and never getting anywhere.
That was
like,
me.
yeah, that's so this whole like little we're really not meeting, we've given this a couple weeks. We're still not meeting eye to eye on this. We still haven't made plans on this. It's getting closer. I'm starting to feel anxious. I would really like to take this as an opportunity to let's take an hour to sit down and talk about it. That is a way to work with your feelings and have him be responsible for meeting you halfway and showing up for that conversation. And then both of you talk it through so it doesn't become an argument. What happens generally is it gets to the last minute or something. And even though it's very normal, it's not healthy.
Yes, it's not. I realized that it wasn't healthy. And I was always emotional and in my feeling. And I got to the point where I got a little depressed. The what I would do in this situation, me not expressing the way I felt in that moment was just starting to eat me out.
Yeah, I'm going to say, yeah, I want to say something about that because I heard this the other day and I thought this really, I don't even know where, but it just, as soon as I heard it, I was like, that was interesting. The more that you are on your feet, like trying to really work this out within yourself and making these attempts to have these conversations and challenging yourself, codependency takes quite a bit of mindfulness and awareness in the moment to not get back into that rut, but carve a new, and that carving of that new path generally says that I got to deal with a little anxiety, fear of aggression from others, whatever. But if I stay with this, that part of us that says, oh, I wish I could have said this, or why didn't I do it that way that time, starts to go away. So we are better on our feet. We have no practice in this space. So if you're constantly withdrawing during the time that you probably, so we just don't have any practice. And I find that thing that I wish I took that opportunity during that time, that starts to go away. So that but that is, I found that I was like, oh, well, that would be wonderful.
Yeah, but that's what I had to start doing. I had to realize that this isn't working out for me. So then I'm like, okay, let's say how I feel, no matter how it might. Let's say how I feel in the moment so that we can deal with it.
Yeah.
And deal with the issues. No matter how each other is gonna feel, we just deal with it. And then, we work around the emotional parts of stuff.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's the part I feel like people are so afraid of feelings. Like, well, actually, it's not the biggest part. The feeling just needs to be talked about enough for it to be neutralized. As long as you feel understood, I can feel that you understand I'm frustrated by this coming up all the time, even whatever. But then but now that we're validated each other's feelings and we can both have different feelings about something, doesn't mean we can't get down to business. And really, the bulk of what you're going to be talking about isn't feelings. Generally, it's that you're going to be talking about the thing that you need to figure out, plan for. This is a relationship we're talking about. So there's a lot of, you're not just sitting there talking about feelings. But people are just won't like, but then that's just seems to be like, oh, that's going to be such a big deal. I'm like, if you have the space to tolerate that your partner feels, then it's not such a big deal. So working on being able to hold space for your partner to have a feeling that you might not have.
Yes, and I had to learn how to accept the other person's feelings too,
Yes, that's right. For what they are. Oh, because this is another big part of codependency. Huge part. We want to control the feeling of the other person.
Okay.
We want them to stay feeling okay, thinking about us in a very specific way, we want to control how the other feels about us, how we are presented in the mind of that other, how we're represented. So that was one of the things about codependency that we call kind of like in the shadow side, is that there's a lot of aspects of codependency that are based on the desire to control.
Okay. So it's the desire to control and also to be controlled, or it's just we want to control the perception of ourselves and that sort of thing?
Yes, we don't want to be controlled. Codependency has a hyper independence to it. Almost, I mean, again, enabling others to be less than, being very independent, the can do, the doer, the responsible one. So we're like, it's not a big, we want you to control us. Unfortunately, there is the element of feeling trapped or controlled by the dynamic, but not the same way that we're looking to. And a lot of people don't recognize that it's controlling to change your behavior to make sure that the other person stays thinking about you
a certain way.
In a certain way. Your kids, you won't frustrate their growth. You won't set boundaries. A lot of people will really protect the, kind of do that stuff with their kiddos, with their partners, with friends to a certain extent. And it's like, it's okay for other people to see that maybe you're not all good. that you have an edge, or you got a little temperamental over here. You got a personality. But
well,
that's
I'm
great.
good at that. When I'm mad, I'm mad.
Yeah.
That's how this podcast came about, because I use it as a medium to rant and rave. And sometimes I go in my little rants, and then another time I'm cool and calm. So it's expressing what I might be going through, which everybody needs to be doing that. But Bianca, 100%. when we talk about codependency, do we have like a measurement, or like autistic people might be on a spectrum? Right. Does codependency have that sort of thing where I can be a little bit codependent, or I'm a lot codependent? Because hearing you talk, I'm saying to myself, okay, I might be codependent. Or is everybody have that little codependency in their personality sometimes? How can we gauge it? Or can it be?
It's funny. I think we're maybe for generationally, I think we were on an uptick of, baby boomers. There was a lot of narcissism in that generation. Because of all of, just the like we reached a new level of latchkey kid, take care of yourself. I'm going to go, do whatever I want, party, make money. At least in the US, this was Gen X were really high codependent. So yes. I'm kind of finding there's a switch again. So our parents would do for us, so we did everything for our kids. We got these little narcissists running around again. So, a lot of entitlement and a lot of just like a dependency. And I wouldn't even call it codependency. Codependency, remember, is I need you to need me because I do everything for you. And I need somebody that's broken so I can fix them because I want to help you. I want to be a big helper. So we're not getting that as much now. And I know probably everybody blasts me out for saying like being so general, but there's books written on it. And so I'm not coming up with this by myself. And I have a lot of experience with, seeing the switch, but I feel like the spectrum of, but I actually call it, and when I talk to you, I did some interview with a Pfeiffer. Anyway, it was good. It was like, I came up with this analogy that narcissism and codependency are like two sides of the same coin.
Yes, that's what I'm getting.
Yeah, it's really kind of interesting, really, because it's like this is what it's set up under, is a lot of times more self-serving parent that wasn't as giving to the child, or interested in the child more. We'll say on a spectrum of narcissism. I really don't like to just call people that in general because that's a serious pathology.
Yeah.
Not a personality disorder, but if it's but what I'm trying to say is that there's the dynamic. Every codependent kind of comes from a narcissistic background because they had to take care of this person and their volatility and their emotions. So I find that the spectrum of codependency really depends on the level of narcissism you were raised around, level trauma you're raised around. So if you were really in a household that was very destructive, and I say incredibly self-absorbed and consuming with whatever their drama was, their violence was, their addictions were, their work was, codependency is very high in that child.
Okay, so is it codependency, is it from childhood, or can I now be in a relationship where, well, I had a good childhood, no trauma or little, that sort of thing, but now as an adult I entered a relationship with someone who might be abusive,
Yeah,
or
more narcissistic.
yes.
Yeah.
And then those behaviors I had to adapt. Can I become codependent as an adult, like start being codependent as an adult, or it has to come from childhood days coming up?
I would say you go on the spectrum, you're going to be more saturated if it started at childhood, less saturated. So but yes, you can totally acquire trauma in adulthood, coping mechanisms and defense mechanisms and behaviors. Absolutely. I mean, I'd never want to discount, it does not have to start in childhood. You can enter into a relationship. A lot of times though, kind of like moth to the flame, a codependent person will be very attractive to somebody who's more
Who needs them anyway.
Yeah. And maybe even seductive or manipulative, maybe like the parent. So in hoping to overcome their trauma, there's a lot of reasons for this, to be seen or redeemed by that person, but that never happens. So that's a lot of unconscious material. But again, if that's not happening in childhood, that's okay. I mean, that's still, people wind up in these situations. But what I find is that, people, the codependency aspect is like, you don't know how to get out.
Yes.
So I still wonder, is like, okay, if it flared up in your relationship and now you refuse to, like, if you really start becoming more codependent in that relationship, okay, well, you still have a lot of work to do, because you can get saturated to the point where you become pretty helpless to just continuing the cycle. And people will stay in it. I mean, that's kind of why I focused my TikTok on that relationship dynamic and codependent men. Because
Yes.
I was getting a lot of that in my private practice. And I'm like, wow, you guys really need to see that this isn't just a woman caretaker problem. This has really been focused. Yeah. Well, I just was saying, like, codependency has really been primarily the audience for this information have been women, caretakers, of alcoholics, I mean, yes, but that's been, no, I think men are incredibly codependent, incredible levels of saturation. Yeah.
In your work, do you find that the women are more codependent?
I think women have this tendency
that take care of you, that natural instinct, that natural thing to take care of others.
Yeah, and I want to, this is a good opportunity for me to say also, if you were born into a culture that this is already 100% saturated in the milieu for how to raise a girl into a young woman, into a mother and a wife. I definitely, TikTok taught me, hey, this is the way I was raised, lady. I was like, okay, I totally get that. Doesn't necessarily mean you couldn't want to form that at some point. But I think that also too, yes, women can literally be raised to be nothing but caregivers.
And that's so interesting, because thinking back, as you said, with the baby boomers and the Gen X, I'm like a Gen X.
Yeah.
I was born in the 80s. And no, that's the way I was grown. You're a woman, you're a girl. So the girl takes care of certain things in the household. Girl. And if you can't do this or that, you're not gonna get married. No man is gonna want you. So that's the way we were actually brought up, that no matter what you do, you're expected to go to school and achieve, and go full length, but you're the woman and you're supposed to be doing all the chores in the house, taking care of the man.
Yeah, and the kids in the house. And this is something I think that we have to stop enabling. So this is the thing, is like, as long as we believe it and perform, that we do all of this labor in the home and taking care of humans. And I know that doesn't produce capital, but meaning money and resources, but it still is a very important thing. It takes a tremendous amount of energy and coordination. And then go to school and do all these other things and go to work and all this. I'm like, wait a second. What are we enabling again, ladies? We're saying that's okay. And that's very codependent. That's not okay. If this is going to be, we're going to need to share in the entire experience.
As you said, I think it's changing a little now.
Yes, it is.
But changing a whole lot now, because these younger females, when you talk to them now, they're like, I'm not having that. I have to have my time, my spa day, my self-care time. We have to share the responsibilities. You take the kid. So I'm realizing that it's changing a bit now.
Yeah. Yes, it is. For the younger generation, they're definitely learned. I think we all have to, but I think that's the thing, is the ownership in how we're still believing this. And is it true? And that's where, oh, wait, I'm having a different experience. And I don't find this to be very helpful. And I'm going to, and then here again, I'm going to, explain this to my partner so we can figure out another way.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk a little about codependency and kids, because I know in your TikToks, you do a lot of work with codependency, parents and codependency, and pushing it onto the kids. Can we talk a little about that?
Yeah, well, I mean, first of all, like kids, people, it's so interesting. I think that this is a concept that people don't necessarily have a full grasp on, but I'll do my best to explain it here. But kids learn like sponges. They literally are observing your mannerisms, the way that you picked up the phone, the way that you rushed out the door, the way you were exhausted when you got home, more so than what you say to them, more so than what you're telling them. So a lot of times, if you are already performing, I say the behaviors of, codependency, which is kind of nonstop running around, going for it, never relaxing, never showing your child the relaxed state.
That's me.
Right. Or that mommy's time to take a bath and like the door is closed, and then they're seeing this, and actually it's, even though they're the ones really needing you, what it's doing is that it's like it's being emotionally learned and behaviorally learned, and those things will activate, like epigenetics. When they get into a family situation, when they get into a relationship situation, all of a sudden it just like a Christmas tree, it lights up and they become you. That's how they survive it. And so, even I think it's interesting. It's like, so there are a couple things here. There's that part of teaching almost completely unconsciously, that they're just absorbing how to be this way. But then there's the other part, which is, are you not taking time to, this is one of the things with codependency. A lot of times they're so good at what they do. They're so independent. They're so fast at what they do. They don't acquire patience. They're not the best teachers. They don't ask great questions sometimes. It's like, let me just do it for you. I got this. I got the, tying the shoes. I'm not going to be late. Okay, well, you're passing along again. The child's not competent. Like, slow it down. The child needs to learn competency. You have to teach them that. So you have to, so I think that's my biggest part for people is that if you're a codependent parent and you aren't taking time to really say, hey, we're going to wash dishes all together tonight. I'm going to have a step stool for you. We're going to teach you, instead of, oh, it's fine, go play your games, just get on my hair. I can do it just in 2 seconds.
Yeah, which I revert to a lot of times. I'm like, just leave it, I'll do it. I'll get through it faster.
Yeah. That tends to, as soon as we're doing that and we're not involving them to a certain extent, then yes, they will never be fast. They won't feel as confident. They don't learn independence, like in some sort of like responsibility, and that they can do. And it's not always necessary to do it all the time that way. Remember, it's just that when we do it one way here and then we do it there and there and there, we find ourselves cutting corners. And that's how we pass it to our kids. We can actually create kids that are very dependent, right? That need us. We might not like that, not that want that, but that ends up being the case. So I say that's how you don't pass it on to your kids, is really by helping them you have to slow down, and recognize that it's probably more valuable to take the time to educate them and watch them go through their learning curve and whatever, and giving them the responsibility than it is to get it done.
Yeah, so it's slowing down and allowing them to, be them, to do it in their time, their way, and maybe correcting a little bit, give them the space.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, giving them some space, but also giving them some direction. I also think teaching them, like, I think the earlier you establish that you can be the one that does that, the less kickback you're going to get. I notice if I tell parents this late when they're the first time they're attempting to get a kiddo to help them with cleaning the kitchen at 15, it's not going to be a pretty picture.
No.
I say start young.
Yes, and at that time they won't want to do it.
Yeah. And they're like, oh, let me help. And then it's a very natural thing to listen to you and to listen to how you do things, and for you to be able to correct them. It's not so abrasive. So,
okay.
Yeah. So start as young as you can. If you haven't, start with little task.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how can I, how can I realize or recognize when I'm going into that codependent mode, as a mother, as a wife, as a co-worker? How can I recognize when I'm going into that codependent mode, and how can I break free from that?
Right. Well, that's, I think, that kind of starting to be able, like you're doing now too, and anybody listening, if you're recognizing some of these patterns, I think it's a matter of becoming really comfortable with what I would call, pattern recognition. And if I can see the behavior, a lot of times people can hear what they're saying and find the behavior before they can really assess the feeling that is triggering it. If I ask somebody, like, what caused you to get into that state? I don't know. Like, what was the emotional trigger? But generally it is something emotionally underlying. So I say, but if you notice yourself kind of, what I find is uptick with, like, you feeling a little bit of frustration, and instead of dealing with that and thinking about it, you just zoom into action. The action starts to put you back into a place where you feel exhausted, and you're just saying yes and going. And then I feel that people generally start to feel pretty wound up. That's like the idiom. Like, I'm feeling wound up. I'm feeling a little ungrounded. And then the exhaustion can set in, and also irritable. So once you start finding that you're in these states, you've probably already been in some pattern of excessive activity, of excessive cleaning, excessive doing, excessive going, and you're not taking time for yourself to really wonder, why have I started doing this? Because sometimes this can be a defense. It's like, because I'm trying to avoid conflict, because I'm trying to distract myself from something I really have to do that's going to be emotionally, I think is going to be hard.
I'm trying to be the good wife. I'm trying to be the best daughter. You know, sometimes those things, trying to be the best for everybody, and you get, yeah, as you said, pretty overwhelmed doing everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that striving that best is some concept of perfection that's impossible. In fact, if you have an idea of perfection, you're also working simultaneously with the fact that you'll never be there. So, meaning like an idea of perfection is in and of itself like the best, the way it always has then that means I'm not. And so you're always working with this failure, lack, I'm not, you know, you haven't obtained it. And you're always looking to obtain it. And whatever, you know, stuff you're doing to yourself to try to be the best or perfect at something, it's like and I think anytime that also is one of these things, again, where too much of our self-worth is identified with all of the things that we would consider, you know, the behaviors or the activities of somebody that's the best wife or the best or the good girl or the best daughter. So we're really trying to avoid actually a lot of probably lower self-worth issues.
Mm-hmm. Also, it's confidence. You're trying to build your confidence instead of thinking that my self-worth is dependent on how I see or feel about me.
Right. And how I feel about me always has to be at a deficit, always has to be less than. That's the only way I keep.
But how do I get out of that? Because I know a couple of people that really, not talking to you now, that I realize that they're really codependent, and it is so deep that they go into this little depression sometimes.
Yeah.
Today they're on, tomorrow they're really down and really out. How can they get out of that? Or how can I help them to get out of that?
Right. How do you help somebody with codependency? Is that I think sometimes maybe if they're having the down day, they have to be in conflict with it. They can't be on the high, getting gratified through the behaviors. That's not going to be helpful. But if they're in the conflict stage and they're in the depressive dip, then that's when you generally, maybe you can help them by suggesting some material for them to read. It's powerful to know that you're in this space and what it looks like. A lot of people really don't know what in the world is going on, because this dynamic is so interwoven into like how they've always known themselves to be.
Yes.
So I think reading about it, studying it, and learning it, and getting a body of knowledge that under your belt a little, and going, okay, helps to like relax, folks. Meaning like, I think we can start working on one aspect at a time. I don't think codependency is one of these things where we just like, oh, you know, it's not like crash diet. You know, it's like it took a while to get.
Yes, I realize it will take a while.
Yeah. But I really like to help people work on one really important step at a time. I ask people, what aspect of your codependency is most draining to you, most difficult for you? Is it like, you know, whatever it is, maybe I can't say no to this person and I'm really feeling hurt by what they need from me, giving it. Okay, well, we need to work on being able to say no to that person and dealing with the consequences and figuring it out. You know, that's a relationship one that might actually be kind of big. The other one is some people get super isolated socially. And I say, okay, well, maybe you can't take on the relationship one yet. Okay, but we can take on the fact that this relationship has isolated you from your peers, from your social life. Why don't we work on getting you at least out of the house from doing the things? And and do a class or sign up for something. But codependency is how you break the cycles you do.
Okay.
others, you do for yourself. You can't put yourself on the back burner anymore. Or if it's, I find myself getting really wound up around my kids at night, and I notice that okay, well then you need to do something for you. What's that? Maybe I take, 30 minutes for a bath or whatever, an hour for a bath or whatever. And I know they're set up with their stuff and their dad can handle it. Take some time for myself. Have you noticed it's taking off of it?
Yes.
I take the opportunity to say no. I take the opportunity to leave the house. I take an hour to work out, or I take an hour to, it's me time.
And I used to feel so guilty with the me time, just because my son is 7.
Yeah.
And I used to feel so guilty just having my me time. I've learned now not to feel so guilty.
How did you learn that? How did you learn to?
It was just becoming so exhausting. And as you say, the anger and the resentment, when you're tired, when you really want to do something for yourself, when you really want to go out, I like my little me times in terms of, I like being by myself sometimes. So I'll watch a movie by myself. I enjoy that. Just, being with me. And when you can't do that, and when you always have somebody around you,
yeah,
I started to, have resentment for the child, resentment for my husband, resentment for everybody around me, that I said, they're not helping. And I realized that it wasn't their problem. It was me.
right.
And when I started saying to my husband, well, I need to go and do this. And it wasn't like he wasn't up for me not having my me time, but it was just me feeling that I had to always be there.
Yeah.
And when I said I needed to do this now, and it was no problem. It's like, okay, stepping out was a problem, but after you went one time,
right,
and put down all phones and nobody could get you, and you just with you ground yourself, then it was okay for the other times. And then I realized that when I leave, nobody dies.
yeah, exactly. Nothing's falling apart. There's sometimes that's the trauma of it. I have to be on top. I got to watch all the time.
Yes.
Nothing erupts. Yeah.
And I realized that my husband thrives because he does the things that I thought he couldn't do. Right. I'm always doing them. And then I realized that you can do that.
Yes.
I'm gone. So I have no problem now. But it took a while.
Yeah.
As a mom and as a new mom, because I only have one kid.
Mm-hmm.
So it took a while to realize that, because you always felt that you had to be there. You had to hold everything together. But
right.
It took a while, but once you got there, it was okay.
Yeah. And that only once you got there, it was okay. You had to figure it out one more time. But all of that was, I have self-awareness. This resentment and this aggression is due to my tendencies, personal responsibility. And then, so I'm going to take the personal responsibility a little further and actually ask for something, and I'm going to let go of control. I don't have to hold anything in place. I'm going to let go of control, and that's a big one. And let them show me competency and ability, and they're okay. That's huge. But then you're growing, and then you can deal with the feelings of guilt, no problem, because you let go of. I really noticed the locus of control is really inhibiting us, stopping us from being able to learn how to tolerate feelings, like feelings that come up for us and other people and all sorts of things. We don't need to be on top. We can just let it come up and do it.
That's good.
Yeah, I think you got a really good program. And really, as far as I'm concerned, you just do that with every single thing. And you tend to come out in a way like, okay, well, I've got more leeway here and less there. And now I'm managing my life, in a state that's not, I'm just constantly compromised.
As I said, I know a lot of people who are codependent, or a few persons, but it's just so hard to help them or let them realize that, and you need to get out of this state. And
Yeah.
that's where I am. How do I help them? Because
Yeah.
no matter how you talk, sometimes it doesn't help. You talk, and
Yeah.
they're not getting it. And you might take strong action. I'm not taking this from you. I'm not letting you do this. But
Mhm.
they still insist and push. And I'm like, you can't get it. You talk hard. Don't you know that this person, they don't care what you're doing or saying, or, you need to step back. Nothing happens. They're still give, do,
Yeah.
do. I don't
Yeah.
know how to help them, or is it just something that they have to recognize? Just like how I recognize that I need my time and space. Is it something that they have to they have to recognize and just work towards when they're ready?
A lot of problems are that way, I would say, but one of the things that people get seduced into, which I say, like, as a helping professional, is like, okay, well, somebody can come to me with a lot of complaints and a lot of grievances, and even ask, what would you do? But then I've just got pulled into a total trap, because I've done this before. It's like, wait a second, what would I do? You're the one complaining. You're the one having a hard time. What are your ideas? And so what I find is to help these folks or help people, they might have a lot of conflict with some of this. And be like, why don't people see that I'm doing all of this? Like, and I just like to sit back at some point and go, I wonder why. I wonder why they don't see you and everything that you're doing. I wonder why they continue to scream and discount you. And what do you think? And once the question, I think, is rhetorical, like, put back on them, and people always the pause and like, I think that that's the thing, is that codependency is a really interesting, I think it's a bit of a jail, a little bit of a mental prison
Yeah.
that it's very scary to come out of, because there's not a lot of self-confidence at first. There's a lot of very diminished in feelings of insecurity and possibly trauma that never dealt with. So, I think it's almost like a comfortable place. And it's like you want to break them out, but I just ask questions and see if they have anything to say. Because sometimes telling them reinforces the bars.
Okay.
Because then they can, like, oh, but you don't understand. Or
Yes, I get that one a lot.
Yeah, like, okay.
You don't understand.
Yeah, well, yeah, you do. So, but also understand that, maybe it's important for you just to learn about it. And I also think recommending things that they can listen to on their own time in kind of an objective secret space, like they can go sneak away and listen to something, or read a book or something, if that's what they want to do. But I think there's so much information now that I just find that people are so vulnerable to knowing they have an issue like this. It might seem like it's not a big deal, but it is. That they might have to learn about it in a place where they don't feel too much shame at first. And because I think this codependency word, just like narcissism, just slapping these big words on something, it is very complex. It's all coming from a place generally where there was a lot of personal pain or issues or something that happened. So be really sensitive about where this comes from. But the fact is that it ends up being our responsibility as adults.
Yeah.
And if we don't deal with it, we actually end up hurting our kids with this stuff, our partners, ourselves. Like, it's acting in the complete opposite way than we really wanted to. It's not helpful to just take care of everything all the time and be, a mess inside. So, but this is great.
So Bianca, yes, it was a great conversation. And in wrapping up, I learned, I'm just going to recap what I learned from you today, that,
Okay.
codependency, you have the takers, the givers, the need to always feel needed or want to do something for others. and those are some of the codependent behaviors. And codependency can bring the feeling of guilt, the feeling of abandonment sometimes, if I don't do or, do for you, then you won't do for me, that sort of thing. So those emotions will come into play. I'm learning.
Big time.
I learned a whole lot. But I also learned that, if you have codependent behaviors, that you have to be self-aware. To get out of it, you have to have that self-awareness. You have to try to bring back the I, bring back what I want, what I'm feeling, bring back a little of me into this whole relationship and all of that. And you have to also let go of control, and I'm guilty of that one. So we have to let go of the control, always wanting to do, or always wanting to affect how people see us. So we always do everything, be in control, because we want them to see us as this, feel as though we are like this, that sort of thing, right?
That's right.
And we have to bring back our self-confidence. So if we feel, if we're displaying codependent behaviors, self-confidence is a part of it, where when we're low, we have to gain back that confidence, because it can be something that happened to us as a child coming up, and we lose the confidence from there, and we have to bring it back. And finally, we have to be responsible for our actions, responsible for emotions and or behaviors as adults. So no matter what happened in the past, it's me. It's I.
Yes.
I, Claudine, that have to take responsibility and for the way that I behave and how I am projecting my behavior on others, because it can affect others.
Absolutely.
So have I summed up everything?
I think so. You got with flying colors. That was amazing. I was like, wow, it's very gratifying. You did great.
So I passed my test today.
Yes, and if anyone can follow that line of thought and really work their way through, I think that's a roadmap. I think that's a path. If you really went all the way through and they listen to what you just said, summarizing, that's really where we go. And we do it every day. It is a practice. It is a practice. And even if we're not able to catch it another day, we kind of wind ourselves back up in a situation that's a little more challenging. You can also ask for help when you're ready for it too. I think also people not just complain, but saying, I really got myself into a situation here, maybe have to get a little bit deeper to unwind why this keeps coming back up. So yeah, that's really wonderful work. Thank you for reaching out. And I hope to see you in Kingston.
You, Bianca, and I hope to see you when you visit Jamaica again.
Yes, I can't wait. All right.
We can link up and we can, tour, and I'm up for that.
I would love that. I would love that.
Thank you so much for the opportunity, for teaching us about codependency. And I know I learned a lot, and I know my listeners will learn a lot too. I know the feedback will be great.
Good. Yes. And then please feel free. There's a podcast all about codependency. Like I said, and there's a lot about men that suffer from codependency there and those types of issues, but women also share those issues as well.
Yes.
And I even work with people in a kind of a therapy type of dialogue through some codependent issues with their parents, with all sorts of different dynamics. Very early.
I've listened to.
Yeah. The very early on, and sometimes that can kind of prime the mind for, how do I think about myself psychologically? It is a way of thinking. So it's kind of cool to get a little bit of that experience. So Emotional Warrior podcast, and you can learn a little bit more too.
Yes, and I put everything for you in the show notes.
Thank you so much.
Everybody will see and can be directed to your podcast and to your social media and everything.
Yeah.
Because that's the way I learned about you, and I learned about this codependent.
Right. We continue to spread the word.
I will. I keep saying I'm in the sharing business, so I share whatever I learned. I don't keep it to myself.
It's beautiful. Thank you.
So thank you again, Bianca. It was
all right.
great.
You got it. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.